Hi, and welcome back to my channel. Today we're doing a quilt trunk show. So I've had a lot of requests for another quilt trunk show. So far I have done one with all of my Christmas quilts, and then I did one with all of my beginning quilts when I very first started quilting. Today we're going to do one that is just my own quilt patterns. So these are patterns that I have designed. They're all available on my website. You can find them at store.confessionsofahomeschooler.com, and I will make sure to link all of that below. So let's go ahead and just dive right in. So we're going to start off with my bundles. Is the Quilty truck bundle. These are my vintage trucks, and I'll try and kind of show them a little bit closer here. And they're so cute. I have one for each month, and then for July I had a lot of requests for something that wasn't so United States flaggy, and so I just did this one down here. It's got a cute little kind of starburst type thing in the bottom, and you can of course do that in any color that you like. And there again are 12 of them for January through December, and then plus the extra one for July. Like I said, well, again, these are traditionally pieced. I used a variety of different fabrics, but the pattern does come with your fabric requirements if you want to make them all match or whatever. And I have seen a couple people doing these as a whole quilt. So instead of putting the months below, they just did the trucks and put them all together in a quilt, which I think would be so fun. I, of course, have mine hanging on the wall back here, and I just swap them out every month. Each time a new month rolls around, I get to put up my other truck, and I kind of like that because it just kind of keeps my sewing room fresh, and every time I pull the next one out, I'm like, oh, I love it so much. So these are a lot of fun. Again, traditionally pieced, some small pieces, so maybe use some Mary Ellen's Best Press again on those, but I'm not even sure if I did. I really kind of just whipped these together, and they're just so much fun. I do sell the trucks individually, but I did bundle them together because I had a ton of requests for that as well. They are available in paper and PDF for the bundle. If it's just the individual trucks, they're just available in PDF. But these are so fun. Again, you can find them in my shop. And here's the Stitchy bundle that goes with it. I just thought I'd show that. This is also available in my shop. And since we're kind of talking about minis, let's go ahead and talk about the Just Keep Sewing mini. This one was so much fun. I've been wanting to do a sewing machine quilt for a really long time, and this was just so fun to put together. For this one, I used my Bonnie and Camille stash, and I've been really trying to sew through my stash this year and not buy any new fabrics. So these are all just little bits and pieces from previous lines that I've had saved up. I think a lot of them are from their Vintage Picnic line, which again was an older line, so it's out of print. It's one of my favorite lines though, and so I pulled what I could from that. And this one just features a cute little pin cushion with some fun spools on top, and then of course the word quilt on the bottom. I have had a lot of requests to add like an option to say sew on the bottom. I am still planning to do that. I have it on my radar. I just haven't had time yet because I've had so many other things going on. This one finishes at about 24 inches by 30 inches, so it's perfect wall hanging, and I just have it hanging in my sewing room as decor, and I love it so much. Again, this is pretty beginner friendly. There are some small pieces on that spool and where the needle is, but otherwise it's no tricky sewing or anything like that. It's really quite easy to put together. All right, so let's go ahead and move in, and I think I'm gonna do these seasonally because I think that's just gonna be a little bit easier. So we're gonna start off with our spring quilts. So this one is called New Chicks on the Block. This one features a mix of poppy cotton prints. It was so fun. It's kind of hard to photograph, so I don't think the pictures turned out quite as good, but you can see some of those fun fabrics in there. And then I used a B. Lori background on this. I think it was her cross background, and I just think it just added a little bit of extra texture to the quilt, and I love it so much. I did quilt this one myself, and I just did a simple meandering on this one. And again, it's a little bit smaller. This one finishes at 50 by 50, but you could easily make it larger just by adding more chickens to it. You could also add a few more borders, but this one is really fun and easy. And this has actually been one of my top sellers. And one of you actually helped me name this quilt. I put out a name suggestion, and one of you on YouTube suggested New Chicks on the Block, so I went ahead and did that. So thank you so much for all of your suggestions because I just thought that was such a fun name. And New Chicks on the Block is available in PDF and paper format. My next quilt is Sweethearts, and I put this in my spring section just because it's kind of leaning up to spring, I guess. This one is really fun. This one also features poppy cotton fabric, and I just picked a variety of reds and pinks for this, and it's really super fast and easy to put together those little patchwork hearts. So it's so much fun. This one finishes at about 55 by 55. Again, you can change the size of this one just by adding or removing blocks, and you can make it a scrappy, or you could even do these a little bit more gingham if you wanted. I think that would be really cute as well. On mine, I used my standard Moda Solid 9900-97 white. It's a really soft, creamy white, and I love it so much. I also used a black print from Poppy Cotton that has some pink writing on it for the binding. I think it just really pops that, kind of gives it a frame, and the pink just ties into all the pinks and reds for the hearts. So this one is so much fun. This one is available on paper and PDF. So the next spring quilt we have is called Sweet Pea, and this is actually one of my favorite quilts. You're probably gonna hear me saying that a lot, but this one is so much fun. I love these ginormous flowers. The finished size of this quilt is actually 72 by 91, so it's a great size quilt. The fabric I used for this is called Lollipop Garden by Lella Boutique, and it was just such a fun print, and it even has some purple in there, which I think is one of the first times I used purple in a quilt before. I tend to not use purple for some reason, but these large flowers are so much fun to make. The blocks themselves finish quite large. I don't remember off the top of my head. I think they're like 16 by 16. Yeah, 16 by 16, so quite large. The finished quilt is 72 by 91, so it's a really good size quilt. If you wanted to make it a little smaller, you could just remove one of the rows of flowers, and then you'd have a more square quilt, and I think that would be such a fun picnic quilt. Again, all traditionally pieced and just so much fun, and every time I put this quilt up on the wall behind me, people are always asking what it is, because it's just such a fun quilt. It released in 2019, and it is still one of my all-time favorites. So my next, and probably most popular next to Sweet Pea spring quilt, is my vintage spring quilt. So this quilt features my vintage trucks, and if you're unfamiliar or you haven't seen my vintage quilt bundle, I have these vintage trucks for spring, summer, Christmas, fall, and Vintage Glory, which is basically a July. And so I have 5 of them. I actually also have a Vintage Christmas 2 that I put out last year. That's kind of a take on Vintage Christmas 1, but it has some extra added fun features, which I'll show you a little bit later if we get to my Christmas quilts. I might actually have to do a separate video for those because I have a lot of Christmas quilts. So Vintage Spring finishes at about 73 by 76, and it features these cute vintage trucks with a little flower pot and a flower in the back, and then of course flower alternate blocks. And then on this one, I actually did a really cool border on it. It's a little bit extra work, but I think it really paid off in the end. So I did this kind of gingham looking border and then a scallop border around the edge of that, and it just turned out so cute. Now that is a little bit, like I said, it's a lot of little pieces, so I'm gonna say this quilt top itself is probably like beginner intermediate friendly. The outside has a ton of pieces which can cause a lot of stretching, so you just have to be careful. So that I think bumps it up to more of like an advanced beginner, or maybe just like an all over intermediate quilt, just because of the amount of pieces. There's no hard piecing in here. It's all straightforward. It's just a lot of pieces, and when you have that many pieces, it kind of bumps it up to that next level. So I would also suggest maybe a Mary Ellen's Best Press when you're working on some of these outside borders. That'll really help keep them from stretching on you, and they'll fit together a lot better. For this quilt, I used a fun line by Lella Boutique called Nest. It's a really soft, kind of nice, I really felt like springy line, and I love the greens and aquas and this kind of coral color that came with it. It just really was so much fun. And I think I may have pulled, I can't remember if it had the yellow in it. I might have pulled this from my stash from one of her other lines, but it's possible that was in that line as well. I just don't remember because it's been so long. This quilt released back in 2018, so I don't remember all the exact details, but this one is so much fun, and I love pulling it out every year. All right, moving from spring into my patriotic quilts, I have some fun patriotic quilts that are, I don't know what it is. Red, white, and blue quilts are just one of my favorites, and so I keep making them every year. And this year I actually made 2 new ones. So I'm gonna show you the ones I released previously, and then we'll talk about my new ones. So the first one that I released is called Vintage Glory. This is probably one of my best sellers. This quilt finishes at 76 by 76, and it features those adorable little houses with flags on them, and of of course a larger flag in the back of my truck. For this pattern, I used At Home fabric by Bonnie and Camille, and I think I threw in some reds from one of their other lines. The red that came with the At Home bundle was a little more muted, and I wanted something a little brighter, so I think I just pulled from my stash for those reds, probably from one of their previous lines, like my Vintage Picnic line, or something that's just a little bit brighter. I did the same thing with the greens because the At Home greens were also a more muted tone, but I did really like their navies, and so anything that you see that's navy in there is from At Home. The other ones were pulled from other lines that I had in my stash. For the background, I also used my standard Moda Bella 9900-97, and I just think it makes all of those fun little flags and trucks pop. And of course, these adorable houses, which I think are so cute. And I actually made just this one block, and I turned it into a little wall hanging, but you could definitely do a pillow out of it, or you could also do a pillow out of just the truck block, and I think that would be adorable as well. My friend who tests for me did a pillow out of the trucks, and I saw it and I was like, oh my gosh, why didn't I make a pillow? It's so cute. So Vintage Glory, this does come in the vintage bundle that I was talking to you about before, and this is definitely one of my faves. My next one is called Freedom, and this one features, again, flags and those really cool starbursts. This one finishes at 66 by 66, and I also added this really fun star sashing on here, and I do have a tutorial on my blog on how to do that star sashing, so you can really do it on any quilt pattern that you like. This one used, again, my Moda 9900-97 white background, and then I used a mix of Bonnie and Camille reds, greens, aquas, and navies. And this was from kind of a variety of lines because I really dug in my stash for this. It's mostly Vintage Picnic, I think, just looking at it. So, and then I really took advantage of this border out here. I did a skinny red border and then a whiter navy border with some red binding. I think that really just frames the quilt so well, and it's just so much fun. So I think I'm going to label this one as about an intermediate or advanced beginner, maybe, just because of the number of pieces. Again, it's all straightforward piece like I mentioned before, but there are a lot of pieces and some points to line up in this starburst and things like that. So you'd have to be careful with your seam allowance, but it's nothing super tricky or hard. So again, this one is Freedom. My next one is called Valor, and you guys probably saw this if you were watching our Vlogmas. I actually was putting this together for my father-in-law during that, and this turned out to be the most fun quilt to put together. It's really easy. I would definitely label this as beginner friendly. This one finishes at 64 by 76, but just like all my other quilts so far, you can really change the size just by adding an extra row of blocks, and of course you can even add more borders. I only did one border on this, that navy border, just to kind of make all those stars pop, but you could easily do more borders and increase the size. And then I did a fun red binding on it. This fabric that I used was American Gathering by Primitive Gatherings for Moda, and it was just the perfect fabric for this quilt. And again, because I named this Valor, my main goal for this was that it would fit the requirements for the Quilts of Valor program. I'll put a link for that below if you don't know what it is, but you can make patriotic style quilts, donate them to Quilts of Valor, and then they award them to our veterans. And it's really cool. They do a ceremony for them, but they do have some size requirements. They have to be patriotic themed, red, white, and blue type quilts, and some kind of patriotic elements to them. So check out their website. They have all the requirements there. This does fit the requirements for that, and I did award this to my father-in-law, and so I don't have it in my possession anymore, but I love this quilt so much that I'm almost 100% positive I'm going to make another one just so that I can have it here. Now, like I mentioned, I love patriotic quilts, so this year I wanted to do another design, and this one is actually one of my all-time favorites just because of how fun and easy it is to put together. This one is definitely beginner friendly, and this is my Stars and Stripes quilt pattern. If you've been following me on social media, I'm sure you saw it because it just recently came out. So this one finishes at about 67 by 87, and it features American Dream fabric by Danny Mogstad, and I also threw in some aquas from my Sweetwater fabric, actually, that I had in my stash. The American Dream line comes with a nice blue with it, like a lighter blue, but for some reason I really wanted to throw that aqua in there, and so I did, and I'm really happy that I did because I couldn't love it anymore. It also features a whole variety of low volume fabrics, so if you have any of those in your stash, pull them all out and put them in this quilt. They go together beautifully. They give this quilt some fun texture and variety, but it still makes it just look really soft and comfy and cozy. For the backing on this one, I used a really cool American Dream print. It's their little kind of smaller floral print, and it's just so sweet. And then I actually did a navy stripe binding that was from my Bonnie and Camille stash, and I think it went perfectly. And of course I added a fun Patriotic label. That came from my Sweetwater tagged subscription. I have subscribed to that, and I have loved all of the labels. They send you 3 different labels every month, and they're usually kind of seasonal, or some are just, you know, some are a little bit more generic that you could use any time of the year, and they all have your names. They're personalized. So it's a lot of fun, and it's a great way to label your quilts. So Stars and Stripes, one of my faves. And then the other one I did this year was a take on my Jellyroll Jamboree quilt. Now the Jellyroll Jamboree quilt is, again, one of my favorites because it is so fast and easy to put together. And like the name implies, it uses a jelly roll. Well, I decided that I didn't have a red, white, and blue jelly roll, so I wanted to use my fat quarters. And so I did do another video here on YouTube for the fat quarter friendly version of the Jellyroll Jamboree, and it was so fast and easy to put together. I really had the entire quilt top put together in pretty much one day. I think I had to stop to like feed my family or something like that. So I think I had to finish it the next day, but really if you have uninterrupted sewing time, you can whip this quilt out in no time. Again, for this one, I used fabrics from my stash from Bonnie and Camille from their One Fine Day line, and I just picked some navies and reds and then some low volumes that had navy and red in them and just kind of alternated them, and I think it turned out so cute. I still have to quilt this one, so it is not done being quilted yet. It's on my to-do list, but I love it so much, and it's going to be ready in time for next 4th of July. And the other thing I've recently been doing is taking my blocks from my quilts and just doing that one block and either making them into a wall hanging or into a pillow, or you could even make them into like a table topper, and they're just so much fun. So I'll throw in some video of those as well. But I think that's it for my Patriotic quilts. Let's go ahead and move on into summer. So my next quilt is Cherberry. This one is so much fun. It features strawberries and cherries and perfect for summer. It finishes at 62 by 76. And this one I actually made using a print called Ambleside by Brenda Riddle. And then I think I grabbed some greens from my Bonnie and Camille stash as well. I did this cute little patchy border around it, and it's so much fun. I love this quilt so much that I actually made another version. I made a red, white, and blue version of it because it's just, you know, that's kind of something that I love to do. I love those colors put together, and it's just really perfect for picnics, a 4th of July, so much fun. Again, this one is traditionally pieced, nothing tricky, and I would go ahead and say this is a beginner-friendly quilt. The only thing that would maybe bump it up would be this border right here, because this border is a checked border and it really can get super stretchy on you. And by the way, you don't actually have to do this border. I of course added it because I thought it was absolutely adorable, so I encourage you to give it a try. It does get super stretchy, so a little bit of best press would probably be your friend in that case. But you could always just do a straight like color. You could skip that border altogether. You can do whatever you want. I love changing up borders on quilt patterns, so depending on the border, if I really love it, I'll do it, but a lot of times if I have another pattern, I will do my own borders and just kind of make something up, because borders are the place where you can really have a lot of fun and increase the size of your quilt really easily. So this one is Cherberry. Again, I used Ambleside by Brenda Riddle for this, and then for my blue and white version, I used some fabrics from my Bonnie and Camille stash. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about Vintage Summer. That is the quilt on the wall behind me, and I'll get out of the way so you can see it a little bit here. This quilt is so much fun. It features my Moda 9900-97 and of course little vintage trucks with surfboards in them. I've got pinwheels, I've got beach balls, and I have those cute palm trees. For this one, I used Little Snippets by Bonnie and Camille. It was such a fun, colorful line. I thought it was perfect for summer. I'm going to go ahead and label this one as intermediate simply because of the amount of pieces. There's no hard piecing, but you do have to be a little bit more accurate. The palm trees are a little bit tricky just to put together, and then those surfboards are also a little bit tricky. It's nothing super hard, but you just have to pay attention to what you're doing so you get all of your seams to line up. This one finishes at 71 by 77, and I did a cute border on there. I did a skinny border with then my neutral background and then a larger aqua border. And I love doing that because I feel like it really makes the design in the center pop. And the skinny border just kind of outlines everything really nicely. And then that wider border increases the size of your quilt and gives it just a really nice frame. So that's my favorite way to border quilts. And you'll probably see that as we're going through all of these. But Vintage Summer, so much fun. This one's available in paper and PDF. And if I forget to say it, any that I'm showing you in paper are available in paper. So this next quilt is called Garden Party, and you probably haven't seen it a whole lot because I made it a really long time ago, and I always forget to share it, but this quilt is so much fun to make. It's kind of a different take on a log cabin quilt because you take a log cabin block and then you sort of cut it up and add some fun sashing, and to me it looked like a window pane looking out over a beautiful garden. So I called this one Garden Party. For this quilt, I used my Tilda fabrics, and oh my gosh, they just really pop. This quilt finishes at about 58 by 76. Again, this is one of those quilts that you can really change the size of just by adding another row of blocks. The fabric I used for this is called Bumblebee by Tilda, and oh my gosh, it's so beautiful, and all of the colors just blend together so nicely, and I really just love this quilt, and it just looks so fun in person. I think it would be perfect for picnics or, you know, just hanging out on your front porch, having a little tea, and just enjoying the summer afternoon. This next quilt is called TradeWinds, and I made this for my son years ago, and he had kind of a sailboat thing going on in his room, and I wanted like a giant sailboat quilt. I couldn't find a pattern, so I went ahead and made one up. Now the pattern itself actually features the ocean as straight lines on the bottom, just a gradient of color, but I do have a video here on YouTube that shows you how to do the curves that I actually put into this quilt, and it's a lot easier than you think, so I'll try and remember to link that tutorial below, but you can use that tutorial for any time you have to do curves on a quilt, and I think it just really added a little extra. This quilt also has a little bit of applique on it because I wanted to put a seagull flying in the sky, and so I did applique that up on into the sky, but other than that, it's actually really quite easy to put together, and especially if you don't do the curvy lines, this is 100% beginner friendly. TradeWinds finishes at about 74 by 74. This quilt, just based on how it's put together, is a little bit harder to change the size of. If you need it to be a little larger, I suggest adding some fun borders. You can do what I like to do, which is the skinny border, another background strip, and then a wider border, and that would really make that sailboat area pop, and it would increase the size of your quilt. So my next quilt is called Happy Granny. I put this out this year when my husband's grandma passed away, and she was one of the happiest grandmas I have ever met. Always had a smile on her face. Her name was Esther. Her dates were January 16th, 1923 to January 14th, 2022, so she almost made it to her birthday. But she was just the most lovely person, and they lived on a farm, and she always had us there and just always had a food and a smile on her face and was always so welcoming. So we love her so much, and we do miss her. This quilt is in honor of her, so I named it Happy Granny. It finishes at 68 by 68, and this uses a variety of reds, pinks, and then background. Of course, that background is my standard Moda 9900-97. You're probably going to get tired of hearing me say that. And then I did a really fun border on this, and you could actually put another border around the outside just to make it a little larger. I didn't, but it looks like that twirl ribbon sort of, and so I just thought that was so much fun. This is very beginner friendly, super easy to put together. The blocks are large, and just the way that you put this together is just so fast and easy. It's gonna like blow your minds. For this one, I used a variety of prints from my Bonnie and Camille lines. I may have even thrown in some pinks from other lines as well. And I just grabbed some from my stash. So some reds and pinks. I have 5 different reds, and then I had a pink in there for the hearts and the centers, and it's just so cute. And so I love this quilt so much. It is hanging on my ladder in my dining room, and it's just one of my faves. Okay, let's move into fall, because fall is another one of my favorite times to make quilts. I love fall quilts, pumpkins and leaves and all of those kinds of things. We're going to start off with my vintage fall quilt. So again, this is another one in my bundle of vintage quilts. So vintage fall. This finishes at about 66 by 68. If you want to make it a little larger, you could always add some extra borders on there, but this one features those adorable pumpkin blocks, and of course pumpkins in the back of the trucks, and then I threw some trees and leaves in there as well just to add a little extra. This is definitely one of my favorite quilts. It's so much fun to make. I list this as beginner friendly because there's no tricky piecing. The pieces are fairly large in here. I mean, the smallest pieces are going to be those leaves, but they're really easy to put together. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is kind of beginner intermediate just because of the number of pieces, but it's super easy to put together. For this one, I used Fig Tree Fabrics, and they are one of my favorites for fall fabrics. They have beautiful oranges and aquas. I did a nice green skinny border again, and then that larger aqua border just to give it a little extra size. And I love how this one turned out so much. And again, this one is available individually or in that bundle and PDF or paper. Okay, next on my favorite. Here's how it goes, guys. I design a quilt. It's my favorite immediately. So I have to say that for all of them. That's just how it goes. But I mean, if I didn't love my own quilt, then you guys probably wouldn't either. So my next one up is a Farmhouse Fall. And this, look at that quilt. It is so much fun. This is definitely beginner friendly. The pieces are large. There's no tricky sewing to it. This one used a mix of prints from Fig Tree. Again, we've got their aquas, oranges, greens, and reds. And then I did a really fun scrappy border with my leftover fabrics. And I just thought that was so cute. You could also do another wider border on here if you wanted to make it larger. This one finishes at 57 by 71. So it's perfect for like a couch or a throw. And then, of course, for my background fabric, I did use my Moda 9900-97. And then I did a cute black binding on this, which is another Fig Tree print. And I just thought it made everything pop. And I just really love doing kind of a unexpected color on my bindings. I think it just kind of frames the whole quilt and just makes it so much fun. Because these blocks are the same size, this is a perfect quilt to make larger just by adding another row of blocks. I also took these and made individual pumpkin and leaf blocks into pillows, and then I put 2 leaf blocks and a pumpkin in the middle, or no, 2 pumpkins on my wall, 2 pumpkins and a leaf in the middle, and made it into a table runner. You could do 4 in a little square and make that into a table topper. So a lot of possibilities with the Farmhouse Fall pattern. So my next quilt is the Cozy Cabin quilt. This one I put out this year, and it's just your standard log cabin quilt block. I have a free tutorial for it here on YouTube, and then I turned it into a fun quilt. And for that one, I used a jelly roll, and then I wanted to make mine a little larger, so I did pull in a few fat quarters so I can make one more row of blocks just to make it a little bit bigger. So it finishes at 62 by 62, and I used a Catalina jelly roll from Fig Tree Fabrics, and I just think the colors are so much fun. And this quilt is great for scrappy projects as well. So instead of buying a jelly roll, you could easily just pull from your scrap bin, cut up a bunch of different sizes of 2.5-inch strips, and then put them together in these log cabins and come up with a really beautiful scrappy quilt. I did it using my jelly roll just because I had one and I thought it was the perfect fit. And then for the sashing pieces, I actually used some background fabric from their Fresh Figs line, and they were just low volume prints from that line, and they just kind of just went in there just subtly, so nothing super stark and harsh white, but they just blended in really nicely with the log cabin blocks. And then on the backing, I also used a low volume print from their Fresh Figs line. So this is one of my favorites. It's super beginner friendly, definitely beginner friendly. Check out the video on YouTube and you'll see how easy it is to make this quilt. And then I do have a new fall pattern coming up this year, so stay tuned for that. All right, so I think I'm gonna take a break here and end our video because I have a whole nother section of Christmas quilts and other little quilty Christmas projects I wanna share, and I don't want you guys to get too bored or overwhelmed. So that's gonna be it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. I will make sure to link all of the quilts below, but again, you can find them all at store.confessionsofahomeschooler.com, and I hope you really enjoy all of the quilty projects. I love going back through all of them and seeing everything that I've made over the years. So thank you so much for joining me for today. Stick around next time for part 2 of my pattern trunk show, where we'll be going over all of my Christmas projects. Thanks for hanging out with me today, and I will see you next time. Okay guys, so the ending of this video took a little bit of a turn. I had all of my quilts lined up on the fence to do kind of an overall shot for the intro of just all the quilts on the fence line. And unfortunately I was kind of racing against weather because we did have a thunderstorm rolling in. And I had one more quilt to get on my fence line and it was just starting to sprinkle. So I was running up on my patio to get that last quilt and my foot hit the edge of the patio and I literally went down with both hands like, you know, just flat onto the patio. And unfortunately, I sprained my wrist and broke my elbow. So I think after all these years of quilting, that is my very first quilting injury. So I guess I can, you know, claim that title now. I do have some bruising. I don't know if you can see it on this hand. It's kind of hard to see, but right here in the middle, I popped some blood vessels. I have that on this hand as well. And of course, I have a fun cast on there and a sling and an ice bag because that's about all that's helping right now. So anyways, I mean, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video, and unfortunately, I think going forward, I'm probably gonna have a little lull in videos, or at least tutorials anyways. I do have some stuff pre-filmed, and my Sew With Me series is done, so the Sew With Me finishing video will still go live. That pattern's all done and everything, so we'll still have that. I'm just not sure. It's probably gonna be a little bit before I can do tutorials, because doing tutorials one-handed is gonna be really hard. But I do have some other stuff already filmed and planned, so we'll kind of see how it progresses. But anyways, that's how this video ended. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and give this video a thumbs up. Help me out if you did, because, you know, make the injury worth the effort, I guess. But thanks for joining me today, and I will see you in the next video.